Welcome to Grief and the Holidays, Changing the Narrative this season. My name is LaWanda Haynes. I am here with Reverend Tanya Bradshaw. How are you doing today, Tanya?
I'm good. And how are you, LaWanda?
I'm doing wonderful. Of course, this is the season, 'tis the season. But what do you
Mhm.
do when it's a season of celebration that heightens feelings of grief? Today, we're going to be talking about holiday grief. Grief in general is a keen sense of suffering or deep feeling of sadness due to loss. There are 5 stages to grief: shock and denial. Once denial wears off, the pain comes in. It's so overwhelming, it often leads to anger. Then you have bargaining and guilt, where you're asking, should you have done something different? Could you have done something different? Moving into depression, which can last from a couple of weeks to years. There are various stages of depression. And then there's acceptance, which it could take. One person could grieve for a few months and come out okay. Other people grieve for years. It's everybody's situation is different. So that's just grief. But this is 2020. So we're talking about holiday grief and
Mhm.
the
And
pandemic.
holiday grief, it's a lot going on.
It's a lot going
We're in
on.
the middle of a pandemic. And being in the middle of a pandemic, it makes it a different world. The pandemic has had a major psychological impact, causing people to lose a sense of safety, predictability, control, freedom, and security. So right now, everybody's just in survival mode. We're just all trying to not catch COVID and trying to be safe. The CDC estimates that a third of Americans are experiencing signs of depression or anxiety because of the pandemic.
Right.
What are we grieving, LaWanda? What are we grieving?
What are we
Going
grieving?
on? We have loss of job and high unemployment in our communities, the inability to connect in person with friends, family, or religious organizations. This is a big one for a lot of people because we're so used to interacting and being able to touch. Missing special events and milestones such as birthdays, anniversary, graduations, experiencing drastic changes to daily routine, working from home all the time and trying to take care of your children and trying to do the things for the holidays. Lots of loved ones who have died from COVID, and the lack of responsibility that has been taken for so many Americans that have died, and not being able to give a proper goodbye, a traditional goodbye and a traditional funeral, because lots of times only a certain amount of people are able to attend.
Right.
So with all that going on in the world, we need to give ourselves some grace. Give yourself some grace. It's okay not to be okay.
Absolutely. And so here we start with, can children have holiday grief? Child psychologist Alan Wolfelt says anyone old enough to love is old enough to grieve. What it looks like for children, they don't really have the vocabulary to express their feelings. Sometimes they may not often be able to articulate what they're feeling, but you might hear them complain of physical symptoms such as a stomach ache or a headache. Their behavior might change drastically. So erratic behavioral swings or emotional swings, that's what you're going to see in children. How you can help them: play is their work. They work out their emotions. It's good for their social and physical and emotional development, wellness, for them to play. So give them an environment in which they can express themselves creatively or actively. And it looks one way for grief just because someone has passed, but now there's also COVID-19 reasons for them experiencing grief, which is compounding situations. So even if you haven't had a loss in your family, your child could still be having symptoms of holiday grief just because they're grieving routines, a change in their schedule, their social life has changed. All of these things help them develop mentally, and so they could be experiencing holiday grief as well.
That's true. So how do you support a child who may be grieving? Well, first of all, you need to ask them questions so you can find out what emotional state they're in, what's going on in their world. Give children permission to grieve. Don't just ignore them and feel like they don't have any feelings just because they're children. Provide age and developmentally appropriate answers. Take care of yourself and model coping strategies for your child. Maintain routines as much as possible and spend time with your child reading, coloring, or doing activities that they enjoy.
Absolutely. And for adolescents and their grief, how they might be expressing their grief is going to be different from children. It's not that they cannot articulate, it's just that they are masters of hiding their feelings. Developmentally, at this stage, they're about discovering their independence and their identity. So isolation comes with grieving for them. Extreme behavioral changes, they might start acting out. They'll start seeking distractions, so they'll turn to their peer groups, and maybe that means shutting you out as a parent or an aunt, uncle, family member. So just understand that's what it's going to look like for adolescents. What they need from you is understanding and non-judgmental support. Listen to what they have to say, show an interest in their feelings, in their thoughts, in them as an individual, and then provide them outlets for expression, whether it be writing, drawing, journaling, songs, poetry. Give them that outlet.
Those are good ideas.
Yep. And for adults, young and middle-aged adults, they're going to process grief differently depending on what the situation is. So fear and paralysis is the ability and an inability to continue with daily functioning might be present for all adults as they process loss and grief. But when a child is lost, there's often deep despair and guilt that comes with that. When it's the loss of a spouse or significant other, there may be a deep sense of loneliness and ambiguity about the future, how to proceed as a single adult. And then if it's a parent who is lost, internal conflict may be there because depending on what the relationship was at the time of death, in addition to the sorrow, there could be guilt, and there is likely fear of what life will be like without their parent. For elders, we are talking about compound loss over time. So they've lost jobs, they've lost loved ones, they've lost friends, peers. And so that takes its toll. And holiday grief is just an increased emotional distress for them. The pandemic even adds a component that brings a sense of crisis and helplessness. So they are dealing with multiple levels of grief.
Okay. And in older adults, there's some things that you can do to help them during the holiday and dealing with grief, so that you can remember loved ones who have passed on. You can take a moment of silence. That could be a new ritual that you have. You can continue a tradition in honor of someone who isn't there, something that they used to do, or maybe something that they like, so that they remain a part of it. You can honor people who are no longer there, just taking a moment to do a toast or someone make a speech or whatever, just to honor the loved one who is no longer there. And limit your news diet. Spending too much time reading or listening to news about COVID-19 and the pandemic can cause you to lose focus, and you start focusing on what you have lost, and that will lead to you having increased anxiety. It's best to focus on what you have and what you don't have. If you constantly feed yourself a diet of negativity, then that will get in your spirit, and that will only increase your feeling of heaviness and grief.
Absolutely. So handling holiday grief for adults and elders particularly, but really across the board, general remedies: practice self-care, self-compassion. Don't judge your feelings as good or bad. Understand that you're going to be on an emotional roller coaster, and give yourself grace, as Reverend Tanya has said. Prioritize good lifestyle habits and routines. It's going to be a natural inclination to lose your appetite, lose sleep, and not want to do anything. Now you're going to have to be intentional about maintaining good eating habits, getting rest, giving yourself time to rest, and then get active. Minimize stress. So the daily decisions, avoid compulsive behaviors, anything that's going to increase stress. Reach out to your community of faith. Reach out to your family and your friends. Do things that previously brought you joy, even though at this moment it may not feel joyful. Just doing something that has previously brought you joy puts you in a position to experience and be open to it. And then look for delight while you're doing those things. Look for things to be joyful or excited or thankful about. Help someone else. Volunteering is a great way to take your mind off of what you're feeling and start to feel like you're contributing to someone else's happiness. And in return, it does make you feel better. Seek therapy and join a support group. Give yourself time. Those are just in general how to deal with holiday grief. And then holiday specific remedies. Choose ahead of time what you will and will not participate in. There are things that you can't control. Music at the mall, music, holiday music at the banks or the office where you go to work every day. You can't control those things, but you do have control over how many engagements you take or what you participate in. Communicate to your friends and family what you're willing to do, what you need from them. Listen to what they may need if it was a mutual loss. And then compromise where you can. Start new traditions, change the celebration, adopt new rituals. Those are all ways to help process what you're feeling in this season that is traditionally a celebration, but you're feeling grief.
Right, right. And consider developing new rituals. You could plant a flower in honor of your loved one, a tree, or create a garden. Display one of your favorite photos of your loved one, maybe from a trip or an event that you guys participated in. You can create a book or a journal of funny stories to share with others about your loved one. You can create a new recipe and name that recipe after your loved one. You can light a memorial candle. You can create a new ritual that can be passed on to future generations. And this is not just a ritual that you do during the holidays, but it can be a ritual that you can do throughout the year to help remember your loved one.
Right.
So do not let the pandemic keep you from staying connected. Even though we have to social distance, we can still connect. We have to stay 6 feet apart and wear a mask, of course, but we still can talk as long as we're safe. We can use technology, phone calls, text messages, social media to stay in contact with family and friends. And if you know someone who is experiencing a loss or dealing with grief, then reach out to them. You guys may be able to draw strength from one another as you share your experiences. And the other option is a pet. Pets are a great resource for emotional support. So though we are in a time of social distancing, as I said, don't let that keep you from connecting with your friends and loved ones. Even if you have to drive by a friend's house and stand on the sidewalk and they stand on the porch and you guys talk and you can drop off your gifts and drop off food and still get that connection. With the grandchildren, to keep them connected with the grandparents, you can involve them in arts and crafts to share with grandparents and then drop those gifts off to the grandparents.
Right. So these are just some things to help process understanding holiday grief, help you process it, and then still enjoy the holidays. If you need support, there is information available at www.friendshipwest.org. You can also speak with a counselor at Be Made Whole. The phone number is 972-228-5224, or you can email Ashanti Davis for an appointment at adavis@friendshipwest.org. We do pray that you have a great holiday season, that you're able to feel the joy of the Lord, even in this season of sacrifice, in this season of loss where we've had to make adjustments for COVID. You all be blessed and be safe. Tanya?
All right. And I'd like to say happy holidays to everyone and to be safe, to be sure and wear your mask, social distance, and peace and blessings.
Blessings.